Music history is filled with bands that built something extraordinary, only to watch it collapse because of a single person. These are 10 bands ruined by one disgraced member. Hit that notification bell so these stories find you first. Number 10. Lostprophets. The charges read like a nightmare. In December 2013, lead singer Ian Watkins was sentenced to 29 years in prison, plus a 6-year extended license, a 35-year overall sentence, after pleading guilty to a series of child sex offenses so severe that the presiding judge described them in open court as appalling depravity. The remaining 5 members had built a genuinely successful career together, releasing 5 studio albums and selling out arenas across the UK and Europe throughout the 2000s, cultivating a loyal fan base that stretched from Wales to North America and Japan. The band released a joint statement disbanding immediately following the sentencing, stating plainly that they could never perform those songs again. Their catalog was effectively pulled from mainstream radio rotation and streaming playlists almost overnight. The surviving members eventually formed a new group called No Devotion, but the commercial momentum was entirely gone, and the Lostprophets name became permanently synonymous with one of rock music's darkest and most disturbing chapters. Number 9. The Glitter Band. For a brief, shimmering period in the early 1970s, they were genuine chart royalty. Gary Glitter and his backing group scored 11 consecutive top 10 hits in the UK between 1972 and 1975, including Rock and Roll Part 2, which evolved into one of the most instantly recognizable sporting anthems on the planet, played in stadiums across America for decades after its release. The stomp of that drum pattern became embedded in the DNA of American sports culture in a way that few British recordings ever managed. Then came 1997. A computer repair technician discovered child pornography on Glitter's laptop and immediately contacted police. His subsequent arrest and conviction led eventually to a 3-year prison sentence in Vietnam in 2006, followed by a separate 16-year sentence handed down by a UK court on February 27, 2015, covering historical offenses committed decades earlier. Rock and Roll Part 2 was pulled from NFL broadcasts, sporting events, and radio stations worldwide. The Glitter Band, his longtime touring and recording backing group, found their name permanently poisoned by association, their cheerful glam rock legacy buried beneath a weight they had no part in creating. Number 8. Milli Vanilli.
Girl, you know it's true.
They moved like pop stars were supposed to move. Fab Morvan and Rob Pilatus collected a Grammy Award for Best New Artist in February 1990, sold over 30 million singles worldwide, and appeared on the covers of magazines across Europe and North America simultaneously. Their debut album, Girl You Know It's True, produced 5 top 5 hits in the United States alone. And for a brief window, they appeared to be the future of pop music, rather than its most cautionary tale. Producer Frank Farian confessed the entire fraud in November 1990, revealing that neither Morvan nor Pilatus had sung a single note on any recording released under the Milli Vanilli name. The Recording Academy made an unprecedented decision and revoked their Grammy, the only time in the awards history that Best New Artist has ever been rescinded. Pilatus battled addiction and legal troubles for years afterward, dying of an accidental drug overdose in April 1998. Morvan has performed steadily in European clubs ever since, but the Milli Vanilli name remains the music industry's definitive symbol of manufactured dishonesty. Number 7. Creed 3 consecutive multi-platinum albums. 30 million records sold between 1997 and 2002. Creed was arguably the biggest rock band on the planet entering the new millennium, with My Own Prison, Human Clay, and Weathered dominating rock radio and filling arenas coast to coast across North America. Scott Stapp's voice was inescapable, and the band's brooding, heavyweight sound connected with an audience that mainstream rock had spent years failing to reach. Then came the night of December 29, 2002, outside Chicago in Rosemont, Illinois. Stapp appeared visibly impaired throughout the concert at the Allstate Arena, stumbling across the stage and delivering an incoherent performance that prompted a class action lawsuit from ticket holders demanding refunds, a suit later dismissed by a Cook Cook County judge, though the reputational damage proved far more permanent than any legal ruling. Internal tensions between Stop and guitarist Mark Tremonti had been escalating for months, and the band officially dissolved in 2004. Tremonti and drummer Scott Phillips immediately formed Alter Bridge without Stapp. Though Creed reunited briefly in 2009, the chemistry never fully recovered, and Stapp's ongoing public struggles have continued to overshadow the music itself. Number 6. The Mamas and the Papas.
All the leaves are brown, and the sky.
Before we continue, which of these band implosions hit you hardest as a music fan? Did you ever see any of these groups perform live before everything fell apart? Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you are watching from. 4 voices that seemed designed by nature to blend together. California Dreamin' reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1966. And the Mamas and the Papas went on to define the sound of an entire era, selling millions of records and closing out the historic Monterey Pop Festival in June 1967, with co-founder John Phillips serving as one of the festival's chief organizers, shaping what would become the most celebrated music event of the decade. The legacy took its most devastating blow decades after the music stopped. In her 2009 memoir, High on Arrival, Mackenzie Phillips, daughter of founding member John Phillips, described a decade-long abusive sexual relationship her father had forced upon her, beginning when she was a teenager. Other family members largely corroborated the account in subsequent interviews and statements. The revelation cast a permanent shadow over the band's sun-drenched California sound, transforming the flower power nostalgia surrounding their catalog into something deeply uncomfortable for millions of longtime fans who had grown up with those harmonies as the soundtrack of an idealized era. Number 5. Jefferson Starship. In 1967, nobody sounded quite like them. Somebody to Love and White Rabbit had turned Jefferson Airplane, their earlier incarnation, into the authentic voice of the San Francisco counterculture, and the band performed at both Woodstock and Altamont in what felt like the defining bookends of an entire generation's hopes and disillusionment. The damage came from an infamous performance at the Lorelei Festival in West Germany in June 1978, by which point the band had evolved into Jefferson Starship. According to multiple band biographies and first-hand accounts from crew members present that evening, Grace Slick appeared heavily intoxicated on stage, launched into a series of deeply offensive remarks directed at the German audience that referenced World War II, and gave what multiple witnesses described as a Nazi salute. The international fallout was immediate and severe, forcing Slick to temporarily leave the band entirely. The episode accelerated internal fractures that had been forming for years, and the incident remains one of the most cringe-inducing and damaging moments in classic rock history, a night that undermined everything the band had originally stood for.
We built this city on rock and roll.
Number 4. Sex Pistols. 3 Chords and a Sneer changed British music forever. The Sex Pistols released Nevermind the Bollocks on October 28, 1977, a record that detonated like a bomb through the music establishment and inspired virtually every significant British punk and post-punk act that followed, from The Clash to Susie and the Banshees to generations of bands who cited that album as the moment everything became possible. Sid Vicious arrived as a replacement for Glenn Matlock in February 1977, functioning more as a visual symbol than a technically capable musician, and his deepening heroin addiction quickly made the band ungovernable from within. Their U.S. tour in January 1978 collapsed under the weight of his erratic and increasingly dangerous behavior. Then, on October 12, 1978, his girlfriend Nancy Spungen was found stabbed to death in their room at the Hotel Chelsea in New York City. Vicious was charged with second-degree murder, released on bail, and died of a heroin overdose on February 2, 1979 at just 21 years old. The band never performed together again, leaving one of rock's most explosive and consequential careers permanently unfinished at precisely the moment it should have been evolving into something new. Number 3. Spandau Ballet. Over 25 million records sold worldwide. Gold peaked at number 2 on the UK singles chart in 1983 and became the anthem of an entire decade. And by the mid-1980s, Spandau Ballet were among the most successful and visually iconic British acts in the world, filling arenas on both sides of the Atlantic and representing the glossy, ambitious peak of the new Romantic movement that briefly made Britain the center of the pop universe. The wound that ultimately destroyed them came not from criminal behavior, but from money and pride. In 1999, lead singer Tony Hadley, along with members Steve Norman and John Keeble, filed a lawsuit against principal songwriter Gary Kemp, claiming they were entitled to a meaningful share of the songwriting royalties that had funded Kemp's considerable personal wealth over the preceding decade. The High Court ruled entirely in Kemp's favor. The legal battle poisoned relationships within the group so thoroughly that subsequent reunion attempts, including a 2009 tour that generated genuine public excitement, were conducted beneath a surface of barely concealed mutual resentment. Hadley officially quit the band in 2017, issuing a statement describing his working relationship with the remaining members as no longer tenable, a clinical conclusion to a brotherhood that had once felt unbreakable. Number 2. The Monkees. Columbia Records constructed them as a television product in 1966 and accidentally created something genuinely beloved by millions of people who understood perfectly well what they were watching and chose to love it anyway. At the height of Monkee Mania in 1967, the group was enormously successful, though the much-repeated claim that they outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones combined, along with the specific figure of 35 million records sold in a single year, is a famous fabrication. Mike Nesmith openly admitted in his autobiography Infinite Tuesday that he invented the statistic in a 1977 interview, later describing it as a complete fabrication, totally bogus, Class A mendacity lie. The music, however, was real enough to sell tens of millions of records and generate a cultural phenomenon that extended far beyond their weekly television series. Peter Tork became the first to crack under the pressure of the manufactured machinery surrounding them. Exhausted and deeply disillusioned with the controlled, artificial nature of their fame, he paid approximately $150,000 to buy out his recording and television contract in December 1968, an enormous sum that reflected precisely how desperate he had become to reclaim his own identity. Their experimental film, Head, released a month earlier in November 1968, had already confused and alienated the mainstream audience the band depended on. Tork's exit marked the beginning of a long, slow unraveling from which the group never recovered commercially, the departure of their most musically earnest member signaling that whatever had briefly and beautifully existed was now over. Number 1. The Beach Boys. 300 million records sold worldwide, harmonies so precise and emotionally resonant that Brian Wilson is still studied in music conservatories decades after composing them. The Beach Boys defined American optimism in sound, and their influence runs directly through artists from Elton John to Billy Joel to R.E.M., a thread of melodic ambition and emotional sincerity that connects virtually every corner of popular music that followed them. In 1968, drummer Dennis Wilson made a decision that would haunt the band for the remainder of their careers and beyond. He invited an aspiring musician named Charles Manson and his growing group of followers to live in his home in Pacific Palisades, Los Angeles, a stay that stretched across several months and cost Wilson an estimated $100,000 in consumed food, damaged property, and personal belongings that simply disappeared. Wilson, drawn in by Manson's charisma and apparent musical talent, even helped arrange a professional recording session for him. The Beach Boys briefly released a heavily reworded version of Manson's song Cease to Exist, retitled Never Learn Not to Love, as the B-side of Bluebirds Over the Mountain in December 1968, giving Manson a genuine if minor foothold in their catalog. A year later, the Manson family committed the Tate and LaBianca murders, and the name Charles Manson became permanently associated with the darkest possible corner of American cultural history. The connection between the Beach Boys and Manson, their songs, their home, their recording studio, cast a shadow over a sun-soaked legacy that had once seemed entirely beyond contamination. It is a shadow that has never fully lifted and likely never will.
Wouldn't it be